Hi, this is Mandla Gagayi, and this is my story in my own words.
So ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by, I'm going to call you sporting royalty. Sports administration royalty, because
That's a bit much, but it's okay.
30 years of experience, I don't know. It's quite a lot of experience that you have bagged over the years, and we're really grateful that you give us the time to just pick your brain and also get to learn a lot more about you and your journey within sports administration. I don't want to do the introduction myself because I feel I won't do it any justice.
Yeah.
But if I were to put you on the spot and ask you to do just a 2-minute introduction, how would you introduce yourself?
Jeez. Mandla Gagayi. I am born 4 April 1976 in a small town by Queenstown called Molitino. Grew up on a farm. Went to a school on a farm. It was those farm schools, a very small building with all the grades in one class basically. So that was my primary schooling. And when I finished my primary school, then I went to another township, again by Queenstown, Ealing, where I got to the current formal schooling system now. And it was quite a change from a farm boy now to a township person. We used to be 5 in my class. All of a sudden, we were 60 now in class, and I had to compete now with those 60 people. But it was a good change. From there, then I think that is when I started to develop passion for sport. Yes, I grew up playing soccer, but for me, it was never about really playing. My interest was always in the background. How do these guys manage to get us to play? What is needed for us to get to play? So from the young age, actually, I captained every team I played for because people saw a leader in me, which at the time I didn't see. I was not interested in how sport is run. So basically, the only sport that I knew was football, and maybe that's because my dream was always to play football. And from there, when I passed matric, I went to PE. To study at Mandla University, and that was back then it was the University of Port Elizabeth. So I spent a good 4 years there, and again I got there and I got involved with football. Second year of my studies, I was already a secretary of the UPE football because that's what I wanted to do. And third year, I was the chairman of the club. And fourth year, when I was doing honors, I was already in the SRC as a sports and culture officer in the SRC. And luckily, after graduating, I got a job as a sports officer at Rhodes University, and I spent a good 8 years there. And actually, I met my wife through sport. Yeah. So we have become a sporting family. But I think what differentiates us from other sporting families is that we are not one-dimensional. We love different sports. My wife played hockey. My son now plays chess and cross-country and archery. My daughter plays soccer and netball. So we just love sports.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in many levels of sport. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But that is me in a nutshell.
I like the fact that you've taken us through the whole cycle of where it all began to how you got involved in the administration side of sport, because that is essentially what you're involved in nowadays. A lot of people will be quite familiar with you, especially on LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
I think that's one of your more active profiles. That's where I personally got to interact with you and just learn quite a lot from the stuff that you do on there. But if we were to take it back to that moment where you start playing football, what would you say attracted you into a sport?
I think football, maybe if I had grown up in a community where there was a range of sports on offer, I would not have ended up playing football. But I think I played football because everyone around me was playing football. from street soccer, and even when we watch TV, the only sport that we could watch was soccer at the time. So I think for me, I got to it because it was the only thing available at the time.
And growing up, so you're saying it's because of the exposure that you had, the sport that you were exposed to was football. And looking back now into the role models, the people around you, and even abantu basekhayeni, do you see any key figures that also groomed you in terms of sports, soccer, people that played football, might have played football or had a firm interest in soccer?
I think my biggest supporter and mentor when I got to play serious football now with big boys was my mom. May her soul rest in peace. I think her passion for football was, she was a Kaizer Chiefs supporter, and she knew every Kaizer Chiefs player, and she was one person, even if I come back from the game, she was always the first person to ask, how did it go? She was always interested in me. I know every soccer boot that I had, she bought it. So she was always my number one supporter, and I think it was because of the fact that growing up, we are 5 siblings. I'm the second of the 5, and though my siblings played sport, but they really did not play it seriously. To them it was just for fun, but for me it was serious. So I think my mom saw how serious I was. So she's one person who really pushed me to really get to understand football and love football and fall in love with football. So really, I think growing up, she's the only mentor. There was never a player on TV that I looked up and said, "Ooh, I would like to be like that guy." And maybe it's because, again, my personality, I'm not one of those people who get starstruck or so see someone doing something good on TV and want to be like that person, because I don't really know that person. Because sometimes what you do on TV is not the real you. You are doing it for TV. So I always get attracted or seek mentors that I really know. Not knowing their representative faces, but I know the person, what they stand for, what they are about. So it's always been, I think my parents to me has always been my biggest mentors that I looked up. And of course, then getting into other levels of sport, I did pick up some mentors along the way. But my first ever mentor for football was my mom.
And I like how you explain why your mother is your mentor, why you looked up to her, and especially because of the fact that you mentioned something very profound, Dr. We often see people on TV, and nowadays it's even social media, and what we see is not really the person, it's what that person wants us to see. And sometimes the young people might pick up and I want to be like so-and-so, not knowing what they've gone through before. Trying to pick your brain, are there any challenges growing up, that you would have faced?
Sure, there was a lot of challenges growing up. I think if I start from the family setting, like I said, we were 5 siblings. I'm second of the 5, and I'm the first boy. So growing up in Ilinge, our parents were working in Johannesburg. My father was a postman. My mom was a domestic worker in Johannesburg. Now we are this family, this child-headed family, and I was that man of the house. At 15 already, I was man of the house. I was managing the accounts. Money was sent to me by parents. I would go to the post office month end to collect the money, and I would have to get my siblings, let's go and buy groceries. So I think that was the first challenge that, in a way, it forced me to grow fast, because I had a bigger responsibility on the family side. And also now, when you look at the schooling setup, where we are these kids without any adult supervision at home, but I must keep motivating everyone to wake up, go to school, come back, do your homework, weekends, let's all do washing, let's do tons of cooking. That's why in my family, all of us can cook. No one can say they cannot cook, because that is how we grew up. But in terms of sport, growing up in townships, where there are no facilities really. To train, you must just look for an open piece of land, and you will have to kill that grass with your feet or your boots to make it flat. So we played in those conditions. And one thing I must also tell you is that growing up, I was a late developer, because I started school when I was 7, but at the time we were required to start school at 6. But because I had this small stature compared to my age group, so back then, when you would go to school, though your certificate would be saying you are 6 years old, the teachers would say, lift your arm over your head, touch your ear. If you cannot reach your ear, then it means you are not ready for schooling. So that's why I started school at 7. So even then, growing up in township football, because I was this small person compared to my age group, football at the time, really age was always a factor. You find that, hey, this is a Grootman, as weak as he is. No, Grootman cannot play second team, must play first team because of the age. So as a small boy, I was always, that option, I would always start on the bench. I would not be noticed, but when they want things to be done for the club, they would come to me and say, can you help us with this and that? So those were challenges. And also the fact that the equipment was not there. You are a club that uses one ball throughout the season.
You know, picking up from that is organizing is a strong point of yours, because it's something that you developed kwasendlini. And it also becomes prevalent when you start talking about a club being about if they wanted something done for the club, you are the person to go to, which is a very important skill when it comes to sports management and sports administration, the element of organizing. Would you say that is what drove you into sports administration?
No, not really. You know, yes, people always saw some leadership qualities within me, but I think for me, I've always been driven by the sense of responsibility. You need to be responsible for what you do, even if it's a hobby. You need to take some responsibility. And because also I don't like to fail. I'm very competitive. I hate failing, though it's also part of life. So I think it was never my plan really to get into sport administration. I think I was doing it naturally, because if someone must go and prepare documents for the club, I would say, okay, if there's no one else, let me do it, because I want us to be organized. And even when I got to university, I didn't study sport management. My first degree was BA, and then honors, I studied labor law. So I never really studied sport, but I was always involved in sport at many levels. And that is what actually made people to notice me. Then even myself, I was surprised when one of my former mentors also, she passed on, Dr. Sharon Bergman. She was the director of sport at University of Port Elizabeth. Well, she said, no man, there's a sporting post, please apply for it. And I was like, but I don't have a sporting qualification. She said, no, you have experience. You don't need qualification, you have experience. And when I got that job, actually, it is what then driven me to say, okay, now let me get qualifications in sport, because again, our human nature is that if you don't have that piece of paper, you cannot claim to be qualified. So I studied sport management, and I found that actually it was very easy, because I was studying things that I've already done. So it was another lesson for me to say, actually, yes, it's good to have qualification, but don't make a qualification a yardstick. That's why even in my office, you'll never see me making qualifications elsewhere, because I don't believe that you must show your qualification that you can do the job, because you can have a PhD but be a most useless PhD. So I studied sport because I was already in it. So I think what really pushed me was just because I loved sport, but I never planned to be a sport administrator until I was given that opportunity then to formally get into sport administration.
All right. So I like the fact that you've also elaborated on the educational part of your journey. And doing your honors in labor law. How important is that degree now within this position that you now occupy and the journey that you've actually traveled as a sports administrator?
It's very important. Actually, now I'm currently busy with masters in labor law. See, as a director of sport, I manage people. And for me to manage people, I need to know their rights and their responsibilities in law, because you cannot just wake up and fire a person or wake up and discipline a person. You need to know how to manage them according to law. So that helps me a great deal, because I don't have to keep running to our human resource department every time there's a problem in the department. I can sit, I can advise, because I know I have that background in labor law. So it's very important, and also it's something that I think it will also help me beyond sport, because I don't think I will die in sport. At some point I must move on and open opportunities for other people, and also for myself to experience different environments. So that is why I need to have these qualifications beyond sport.
I'm actually going to pick your brain on that one. I'm going to put it in my parking garage. Where would you move on to? But not now. We'll ask that one at a bit of a later stage. So you say that the labor law does play a crucial role, and it's a very common factor that I'm picking up with people involved in this sport, that not everybody starts out with the sports management degree. A lot of people start elsewhere to come back into sport, and it's quite important, but we'll touch on it later. So you get that call from your then mentor to say, apply for the job at a sports officer at the university. Yeah, at university. Was it Rhodes or university?
It was at Rhodes.
At Rhodes. So they call you and they say, apply for that job. What goes through your mind at that point in time, not having that paper that says it's sports management related?
It was a bag of mixed feelings, because I remembered our conversations when I got to the university. First time I met her, because remember, I came from a family where I knew that my parents would never afford education, a university education for me. So the first thing I did when I got to the university was to go and look for jobs, because there was my brother coming after me. I knew that when I do second year, he was going to be doing first years, and I knew my parents were never going to afford our education. So in my efforts of finding jobs on campus, I decided, let me go to the sport department, man. I get there and she asks me, okay, what are your dreams? I see you love sport, but what do you want to be? And at that time, I was in my peak of my football career. And actually, I had just come out of a week at Swallows for trials. And I tell her, like any passionate young student, no, I want to be a soccer player, I want to play professionally. She looked at me and laughed. This is a white woman. She looked at me and laughed, and I thought, okay, naturally white women don't, especially white women, don't like soccer. So that's why she's laughing at me. She's looking down at me thinking, she said, no, I'm not laughing to offend you. I'm laughing at the fact that I see the fire in your eyes, but you are misdirecting it. You are thinking very small. Why do you want to be a professional football player? You're going to play for 10 years if you are lucky, or you're going to break your leg within the first year of your season. What are you going to do after that? So stop thinking small. Instead of wanting to play soccer, why don't you want to manage those that play soccer? Because you can manage them for life. So when that call came, first it took me to that conversation. That, hey, maybe I should have changed my degree after that conversation and started sport, because now I might miss out on this opportunity. But also, I took comfort on the fact that she said, the fact that she would say to me, apply, it means surely as a sports director, she sees something in me. And I took my chances. I applied. And when I got to the interview, actually, it was a fun interview. I didn't feel like I was it was like this conversation, basically. And yes, I just told my stories. I told them my history and how I've been involved with sport. And a day later, I got a call. And they said, you got the job. And Now instead of celebrating, I asked the guy, the HR guy who calls me, you got the job? I said, yeah. How did I get it? because I still couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I said, no. The panel said they saw the passion in you. They see that you can do what the university wants. So that's why you got the job. But the advice is you must also get a sports qualification when you are working. And I took that advice.
And how do you then balance working and studying? Like, how was that challenge for you, especially working within the university environment?
See, for me, balancing sport and education, it's something that also helps me to lead by example. Because remember, here at university, the students that play are firstly students, but we also say they must play sport. So if I cannot do what I'm saying they must do, then I would be a hypocrite. So that is why I trained myself that, no, let me show students that I can also have a full-time job and also study. That's why even now I'm studying masters. Because we cannot say to students, no, balance sport and education, but we cannot do it. I must leave. By that example, if they can see me graduating with them, because I've graduated twice at UWC already, if they can see me walking that stage with them, then they take inspiration to say, okay, actually it is possible. They're not just saying it. And when you're in a university environment, I always say you need to study because we study for free. Then what stops you from using the opportunities that are there? Because remember, learning is infinite. So that is why we also need to develop ourselves to keep studying. When I have my one-on-ones with my staff, one of the questions I ask them is, how many jobs have you applied for in this year? If they say, I didn't apply, I say, why did you not apply? How do you test if you're still relevant in your work? Because you need to apply. If you got rejected, then it means your qualification is not aligned. Then go back, study some more so that you can be aligned. Because I want a colleague who's gonna say, I applied, I got an offer, but I rejected it. That is, then I know that, okay, my staff, including myself, we are still relevant to the market. I also applied for jobs. I had a job offer last year in December, a big offer, but luckily the university negotiated and kept me here. So sometimes we don't apply so that we can move. We apply to test our relevance in the market. So that is why we must keep studying whilst working.
I like that, and I really like that element of testing yourself in the market, because as people do get, I'm not sure if complacency is the right word to use, but we do get comfortable once we get into certain positions. And that's something that I'm going to steal from you now, I'm telling you now, and I'm going to put it in my own pocket just as a learning curve for me. But what are some of the strategies you've implemented that have helped you balance the education side and working? What strategies do you employ, to continue and not fall behind on your academic work while still delivering when it comes to the work that you do?
It's all in the planning. Firstly, you need to understand that you can never develop in comfort. You need to be uncomfortable in order to progress. And what I do in looking at my work, I focus on what is important, not on what is urgent. Because I think one of the flaws of the managers is that they tend to focus on little integrity that is urgent but not important. So when I plan my schedule, I look at what are the key areas that I need to focus on during this month. And once I have them logged, then I know this is the only area of focus that I'm going to focus on. And then that allows me to free up time to also focus on my studies, because I don't have to keep dealing with urgent things every day. But when I get home, looking back and saying, actually, what did I achieve today? I didn't achieve anything because I was responding to urgent emails. So it's all in the planning. Plan, focus on what is important, not what is urgent. Because sometimes what is urgent for you as my colleague is not urgent for me. So I will not then delve into your urgent things. If they're urgent for you, you can come leave them on my desk because they're not urgent to me. I will get them in my own time. So try to manage your time. don't be managed by other people's time. Then you will see that actually you have lots of space within your calendar.
I like that. And the time management factor is such an important thing that transcends industries. It's not just for sport and it's not just for students, but the planning element. I'd like to pick your brain on that. When you say you plan, do you plan in a month advance? Do you plan your month in advance to say, okay, over the next 30 days of November, this is what's coming up, and then do you sit and then plan, okay, these are the study times you would have free?
I plan 6 months. And then I break those 6 months plans then into months. Then I already know now what is my schedule for November looks like, because I have to know, otherwise I will fall into that trap of being managed by other people's time. And also I keep educating people around me that we all have 24 hours in a day. So no one has got 26 or 25. We all have 24 hours. So what we need to do is to manage within that 24 hours. If you choose to sleep for 8 hours and I choose to sleep for 4 hours, that will make a difference. Because it's those little seconds that makes a difference between winning and losing. So if you choose to manage your time wisely, then people will think you have more time on earth than they have. Whereas we all have 24 hours, but we choose how to manage each hour and each minute.
I like that. So that's another element that I'm going to steal, especially the fact that you plan 6 months in advance. I think for me, that's something I'm putting into my book again as the second point. But now looking then ahead to May of 2013, I believe, when you start this role. As
2015.
It's 2015, that's correct. So when you start your role as the Director of Sport at UWC, can you take me back to that application process? Because I do find a lot of learning curves within that. And, how did it come about, the opportunity itself?
It's a long story. Remember, I had been at Rhodes University for 8 years. And there was a misalignment. During that 8 years, I think the first 4 years were years for me to adapt into sport administration. But from the 5th year on, I found myself feeling like a fish out of the water, because I'm very competitive. And now I was in an environment that says, no. Sport is just about mass participation. Just allow students to have fun. You are not held accountable for winning or losing, as long as students had good fun. And for me, that started to work in my mind, and I started to feel unhappy in my work. And I think because of that unhappiness, I ended up now, I found myself standing up against certain things that were a norm in that environment. And that was a time when I decided, actually, maybe I need to move. Maybe I've been here for a long time. And now I'm starting to challenge things that have been here for many years without me challenging them. And what actually was the last straw is when I found myself saying to a student, no, don't come with new ideas here. This is how the system works here, and we will not change it for you. And when I got home and reflected in that statement, it was the statement that told me that you need to get out of the system, because now you are disgruntled and you're going to end up blocking the progress. And at that time, I was in the USA executive with the current vice chancellor of UWC. He was the president of USA at that time. So around late 2013 into 2014, in one of the meetings, he says to me, look, there's going to be an opening at UWC. You must apply. But I didn't take it seriously at that, because I want to see the advert before I can take it seriously. I said, no, fine, Prof, I'll look for that advert. And when the advert came, actually, I got a call from the office saying, the advert is up online, please apply. And I applied. And one thing I must also tell you is that Cape Town was never my favorite city. Was not in any list of my favorite cities.
Really?
Yeah, because of the stories, gangs, drugs, racism, and all that. So my family knew that whenever we spoke about destinations, Cape Town was never on the list. But I said, no, man, let me just apply and see how it's gonna go. And I came for the interview. I gave a good presentation, and a week later, actually after the UWC interview, I also had an interview at VUT in the van. So I went there, and again I impressed them, but because of the setup there, even during the interview, I became honest with the panel. I said, colleagues, you must not consider me for this position, because already your conduct that you are displaying in this interview, it does not attract me to come to your university. You cannot have people coming in and out of an interview room, going to the chairperson, say, can you sign this document quickly, can you sign this? I was like, no, these people don't know what they are doing. So I said, don't consider me. It's been a good experience coming here, but you must not consider me for this post. And luckily, when I left that campus, I got a call from UWC.
To say, come to sign.
Yes. But one thing I knew about UWC, actually about the Western Cape, was that there's lots of talent in the Western Cape. And it just needs to be managed. And I knew what I was bringing was good human management to UWC. Because talent has always been there. UWC has always been competitive, but not reaching that next step. Because I think what my predecessor did very well was that she set systems. When she left, there were good systems in place. But when she left, she had not then spent time to make sure that she builds people to fit into those systems. So my job was then to come and say, okay, I'm not gonna change the system, but I'm gonna work with people now to fit that system. From the cleaner to the bus driver to the student, the groundsman, we must all understand what we want to achieve. Once we all are on the same page, then UWC will flourish. That was my approach.
There's quite a number that I'm going to pick from what you've said. Firstly, what gives you that confidence? Because our country, we're being honest, unemployment is a real thing, number one, especially for the sports industry. Because I always say to people, sports industry in this country is not it's not a career path that's been developed over many years. It's a closed circle, and it's still growing. If you compare it to your teaching has been there for many centuries. But sports management, it's the last 50 to 60 years that it's been around. And formalized, it's less than 10 years. What gives you that confidence to say in an interview that please do not consider me?
Well, I think for me, what gave me the confidence to say I will not take it was a principle matter. It was a principle issue. You don't have to join a bad system just because you're desperate for a job. You still need, as a person, you must have your dignity. You must have your principles that you cannot compromise. Because, you see, for me, if I was going to accept that mediocrity, it means I was accepting that, okay, I'm joining this and I must allow it to happen because that is how I got into the system. I cannot go back now and say, this university is disorganized, whereas I was sitting in an interview seeing the disorganization, but I accepted the job. So, and also it was also an education matter for me. I was trying to educate also the panel to say, next time when you do these things, consider other people, because not everyone is coming desperate looking for a job. Other people are coming, they have jobs already. Like, I had a job, so I had nothing to lose there. So I had to educate them and say, no, if you do this, then don't consider me. And also, it was a way of showing them what I stand for. Because for me, if I have an interview with you, I cannot have people coming in and out of my office. They must respect that space. So it's about the respect at the end of the day.
And I like that. It's a very powerful statement that you also make to them in terms of you as a person. And I think it would have created an impression on them that later on in life, when they come to interact with you again at a later stage, they already understand that principle matter that you put forth. And then the second part that I want to pick on is, you did say Cape Town was never a place that you ever thought about as a destination. The offer comes from UWC. What then changes your mind to say, okay, let's have a look at this?
Well, the interesting thing about the UWC offer, it was actually lower than what I was getting at Rhodes. It was lower. But because I already had my own frustrations there, thinking that I've been in the system for too long, I needed to move. So with my family's support, we decided, man, take the offer, let's go. It will be also a good environment for us just to get out of a small town of Grahamstown. And luckily, when I took that offer, because my wife is an educator, she applied for a job and also got the job. So when we moved to Cape Town in 2015, actually we were all moving into our jobs, and the kids were going to school. So it was never an issue of, hey, we're gonna sit there and someone must start looking for jobs. We came already organized. And actually, I think coming to Cape Town also opened my eyes, because now I got to understand that actually Cape Town was not what it was portrayed to be. Yes, it's got its problems like any other city, but I found Cape Town actually better than Johannesburg, because I spent half of my life in Johannesburg. Because from Queenstown, when I passed matric, we moved, all of us, we moved to Johannesburg. So we stayed in Johannesburg, Dobsonville, from 1995 until now. Actually, we still have a home there. But if I were to choose between Johannesburg and Cape Town, I would choose Cape Town any day. And I think in Cape Town, it's about the neighborhood you choose more than anything. Because in my neighborhood, I can leave my car unlocked on the street for overnight, nothing's going to happen. Contrary to what I used to believe when I was in the Islamic. Yes.
I won't dig into that a bit much, but I'll then. Interestingly, you are in the 8th year as the director of sport at UWC, and you finished 8 years. You left after 8 years at the University of Rhodes. And you've already touched on the differences and especially what led you to step out of the previous position. If you are now to sit back and retrospectively look at your journey at Rhodes and your 8 years at UWC, what are some of the key lessons that you've picked up in your role as a director of sport?
Yes, I think the difference is, I think what Rhodes did very well for me was to give me that versatility. Because when I was at Rhodes studying as a sports officer, I managed over 15 different sporting codes. So when I came to UWC, which has got a lesser number of sporting codes than Rhodes, I settled very quick, because I knew basically how to run each and every sport. And also with that experience, it also gave confidence to my team to say, actually, this person knows what he's talking about. But the key difference is that Rhodes was mass participation and UWC is high performance. And the nice thing with the high performance environment is that not every day is the same. Things are very dynamic. Every day you wake up, you know there's something new that I will learn and experience. Unlike in a mass participation environment where actually it becomes routine. So that is what has been fulfilling about the UWC environment. Every day I learn something new. And also the culture and diversity of students that we will work with. Because I think at the time, at Rhodes at that time, most students at that time were well off. It was easy to say to students, hey, pay this much, we are going to Johannesburg for a competition. But at UWC, you cannot just say to a student, pay 1,500 rand, we are going for a competition, because you know where the students come from, you know their struggles, they are not so well off. And also that is fulfilling and rewarding, because as much as you see these students as not well off, but the energy they bring and the lessons they bring to you, actually some of them, they remind me of myself. Because when they walk into my office and telling me their stories, I tend to see myself in them. When I was young, I was at first year at university, and that is fulfilling because I can see that, okay, I was there before, and this is an opportunity for me to impart some knowledge whilst also learning So, and that has allowed me to be closer to students, because some directors are called director and they are never even seen in their campuses by students. No student dares walk into the director's office.
Yeah.
But yeah, I meet every student, they call me Mr. G, all of them, they come to my office, they know you don't have to make an appointment with me. If you are around the building, come, I will spend a few seconds to listen to what you have to say. So that is how rewarding the UWC environment has been.
And I like the analogy that you made of the two environments, that Rhodes was mass participation, and at UWC the focus is more on the high performance element. And if we look at the greater landscape of sport in general, even if we stick to a South African sporting landscape, that is essentially how the industry is. It's mass participation, and then there's the high performance element of it. I want to pick your brain now more on the current state of sport in South Africa. What do you make of it?
I think sport in South Africa is very challenging. In that, I think, unlike in developed countries, and even in some developing countries, our government, firstly, doesn't really see sport as business. Sport is a by the way. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm saying that, you look at the budget allocation that goes into sport, and if you compare that to the value that sport brings to the country, not only in financial terms. When you look at the sports development plan, we spoke about healthy winning nation and all of that, but sport achieves all those things and even also contribute to the GDP of the country. But the input from government is very low. And when you look at federations themselves, federations are resisting transformation. If you go across in all these federations, you find that a lot of them are still led by very old men who still believe that sport is a preserve for men. And that is why when you compare in every sport, you look on the women's side of sport and the men's side of sport, you tend to see that focus is more on men, even in terms of sponsorships. Sponsorships are always targeted towards men. But when you look in terms of the delivery and performance, women are actually doing far better
with less.
Yeah, but because sport is still a patriarchal space, then it affects the development of sport. It can, you see, currently you have a banyana that must still negotiate bonuses and threaten strikes for them to get bonuses. Whereas, if you look at Bafana, that is currently underperforming the range of sponsorships that they have. Banyana has got one sponsor, Sasol, compared to Bafana, that's got a range of sponsors. So, and the reason for that is because you look at the SAFA executive, it's old men who are not open to the new ideas. You go to rugby, you look at Springboks, and then you look at Springbok women. Again, it's chalk and cheese. Springbok women, yes, can come and play at UWC, they are international matches, but Springboks must go to Cape Town Stadium or Ellis Park or Loftus. Again, when you look at the financial inputs, it's chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
Cricket is trying, at least cricket is one that is really trying to say, let us try and equalize the payments. Yeah. But all other sports are resisting to transform. And it's not only transform in terms of gender, commercially and otherwise they are resisting to transform. So that is why South African sport, we will still be found wanting in many areas because we are led by an old guard that doesn't want to change. Look now, our Springboks almost played without a flag at the World Cup because we still cannot adopt the WADA codes, which when we were told about in 2021, up until now, we still have not adopted because we're led by old people who don't understand sport, who are just there as political deployees.
I think I really love quite a number of things from what you've said. Firstly, the element of transformation and the way that you talk about it is not just about race, which has what the media has portrayed transformation to be, what we've all come to be accustomed to transformation being a racial element. You've mentioned gender equality. You've mentioned the old guard stepping away, which is a massive thing, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent, where a lot of our leaders, not just even in sport, in general, the leaders of countries are very old people. And I want to come back and focus firstly on the gender element, because we'll get to the others, but just that element of the gender. You mentioned the women's teams outperforming our men's teams on a number of occasions, and the interesting thing is they get less, but they give you more, especially when it comes to performance, which is a critical thing in sport. How do you think we could start addressing such a challenge of that gender equality?
The biggest problem with sports people, they don't believe in doing. You will never hear that, hey, there's a shutdown because sports people want more money, or sports people are marching to parliament. We only associate those things with the other service delivery issues. We forget that sport is also a service delivery issue. So, and by doing that, actually, we let down the players themselves, because remember, they are a small number. We as a population, we're supposed to be standing up. Not only standing up when there are issues. You see now, during the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, everyone was talking about equal payment, professionalized women's football. When last did you hear that statement? It was during the World Cup. World Cup is gone. No one is saying anything about that. We will be reminded again when the next AFCON comes. Then you're gonna see minister saying, "Hey, we want professionalized women's football." When did they know that women's football needs to be professionalized? You cannot only know that because there's World Cup. There's been many World Cup in Olympics. No one saying those things. So we like to play in the audience. So what needs to be done is not only for sports people, but for the population, like we do when there's Santaco strikes. Santaco just closed the whole country. Why can't we have sports people closing the whole country, saying we do not want to be treated this way? It's because we always want to be politically correct, and the reason that leads to that is because sports people themselves have got endorsements. Now they don't want to speak out only to jeopardize those relationships with their endorsements. So that is why they are always guarded in what they say, because you might say something, and in South Africa and in Africa, you get blacklisted very fast when you say things. So now that is why, look at Sunette Felion. Where is she now? We don't know where she is, because she used to have big fights with Fiki and Balula. Now we don't know where she is, what she's doing. Now the next athlete doesn't want to come and speak out because they know that they will be blacklisted, and because they get peanuts as salaries, they are dependent on these endorsements. Now, if someone is gonna say to your sponsor, "Hey, look at this one, is not behaving," you might lose that sponsor, and that is even more critical for women, because see, the issue of gender, people look at it in terms of play, but it's women who fall pregnant and they must stay away from sport for a while. But when they come back, we expect that, no, they must perform at a certain level. We don't say to you, your partner is pregnant, therefore you must also stay off. We don't do that for men. So that is one thing that we also disadvantage women on. And we have not even touched on issues of disability. So I think sport in Africa needs young people to stand up. Every color, every race, disability, ability, everyone needs to stand up and say, this is the plan for sport in the country, and we are not going to participate until you achieve the following. Because the decision makers are very comfortable there. I remember I said earlier, you never develop in comfort. Unfortunately, we are led by a very comfortable. That's why you hear ANC people saying, "Oh, ANC will rule until Jesus comes." That's being very comfortable if you can make such a statement. You are too comfortable. Therefore, you will never progress because you have told yourself that I'm here to stay. So that is the problem with our leaders. And you know how they do that? If there's going to be elections, you will find these presidents, old men with big tummies running around the country, paying those weak provincial leaders to say, if you vote for me, I will guarantee that you stay in your position. And because if you look at provincial federations, those people are volunteers. So they need every little cent that they can get. Now they get bribed easily and they end up going to vote for the same people over and over.
Okay. You make the element of a toy, I'm really enjoying it because the last time I've seen it in sport, or the last recollection, was when Kaizer Chiefs fans stood up against the Kaizer Chiefs. I think it was back just before the CAF final. They stood up against the whole management, and the fans marched to a Nakureda, and essentially the result of that was Coach Kevin Hunt getting released by the team because the team was performing so poorly. So it is effective because we are also seeing it on many occasions where, even in terms of general population, we stand up against the government through marching and taking a stand. How do you think, and I like the fact that, firstly, before I ask you the question, I like the fact that you say the players themselves are guarded by what they say because of what they are trying to protect, and they need to protect that because there's very little that they are getting. Now, would you say that is the element that the public needs to then join in? Is that where the public needs to join in and start assisting our women's athletes in terms of us being that voice for them?
Definitely. And it must start with male athletes. It must start with male athletes. How many Bafana players did you hear coming out saying we support Banyana when they were striking? Not a single. Because they knew that if I come out, I'm not going to play for Bafana again. So it needs brave players to stand up and say, I'm not going to stand for this. If Banyana are not getting the same bonuses like we do, then sorry, I don't want to play for this team. So once players show that they can stand up, it's going to be easy for the public to back them. But you cannot back people who do not show that they need backing. And also, when you make an analogy of a Kaizer Chiefs match, it was not a genuine match. Why don't the same supporters go and march against Kaizer Chiefs and say, why don't you have a women's football? Because if they were genuine, they would have marched to Naturena and say, why don't you have a women's football? Sundowns has got women's football. TS Galaxy have, Royal AM have. Why don't you have? They're not saying those things. And the two biggest teams, they just march so that a white coach must be fired. Did they march against no, they just threw stones and said. So it was not an honest match. It was playing to the gallery, like we always do in South Africa. We like to play in the gallery, and that satisfies our leaders. Because what did that match achieve? Gavin Hunt got fired, and so he comes. He just got fired. So did they really achieve what they wanted? No, because it was not a planned match. It was just an emotional match.
And I like the fact that you mentioned the element of Kaizer Chiefs not having a women's team. And I'm going to ask you this question. The two biggest football clubs in this country, both of them do not have a women's football team. What does that do for sport? Because I mean, if the two biggest teams are not supporting women's football in that element, what are they portraying to the rest of the country?
They don't care. They don't care. It doesn't do anything to them. Because who owns those two football clubs? And what is their role within the football structures in the country?
They are both on the national executive.
So they don't care. They make the decisions. That is why if Chiefs and Pirates had women's football teams, women's football would have been professionalized a long time ago. But it's because they don't care. It doesn't hurt them a bit. But what you will see now, when Kev said, okay, now we're going to start penalizing teams who don't have women's football, what happens? you will see now, they will not develop women's football. They will go and buy a ready-made team and claim that they have developed it. Does it really help? It does not, because they should plow, like they do with the boys. Chiefs has got an academy. Why there is no academy for girls as well? Because if they were saying to us, okay, our team has not qualified yet to play for Hollywood Bets, but we are currently playing there, we would see that at least there is something, but currently we don't see anything. And it's because they don't care.
And what do you make of that decision from UCAF to say you will not play? Because UCAF came out recently and said teams that qualify for the CAF Championships competition cannot play in that competition if they do not have a women's football team.
Again, that was just a nice media statement. Did it happen? No, they suspended that decision. Because this year, teams are still playing without having women's football. Because it was just a nice thing to say for CAF so that they can look like they are trying to do something. Because if it was serious, it would have been implemented this year already, but it's not been implemented, and teams are continuing to play. So it's what we like to do as African leaders. Speak to the media, say all the sweet nothings, and then go back and do the same old things that they are doing.
I like what you've said, and essentially what I'm really getting is Nyani, the leadership is at a point where some of the things that they do them for show. They do them just to show people this is what we are thinking and never really act on it. And leadership, once again, we go back to say it's this very same old guard. Can I ask you, because there's a lot of young people, Abafunde Sports Management, that have a passion for sport and essentially want to get into the sports management element of the sport. What strategies would you say we need to implement as the general population to start ensuring that there is a transition to start including the young people in the leadership roles of sport?
The challenge we have in South Africa is that maybe through our evolution, we did away with the volunteer system. Back in the days, actually, the current people that are involved with sport administration, they started as volunteers. All of them started as volunteers. But when we started to say now volunteers must be paid, that is when things went wrong. And now we don't have those graduates, sports management graduates, working in the communities free of charge to gain experience, because they tell themselves that no, they have a degree, therefore they deserve to get a job. And now if they volunteer, they must be paid. And that, doing away with the culture of volunteerism, affected sport in terms of the people that are recruited. And the second thing also, if we look at the curriculum, the sport management curriculum at universities and colleges, you link it with the practical work of sport, there is a misalignment. There is a misalignment. And I have seen it even within my own team. I have colleagues who came, fresh as students, graduated out of UWC, they come, they get a job here, and they will tell you after 3 months that, shiz, what I learned in class is not what I'm doing here. It's more complicated than what we learn in class. So we need to also strike a balance in the curriculum to what is done practically and what we study for. And the last thing that we need to do within the sports management curriculum, we need to have some sort of entrepreneurship. Because sports management currently trains you to study so that you can get employment. It doesn't train you so that you can go out there, have your own business. It is only sports science that will allow you to do that. If you study physiotherapy or biokinetics, then you can have your own practice. But sports management, the culture is that study so that you can get employed. And employment in South Africa, we know it's a serious challenge. And in sport, it's also about networks. Sport is a closed industry. And once you step out of it, it's very hard to come back in. So, because it's a small industry, people don't network, and because they don't network, then they end up not getting opportunities. Because I will make an example about university sports to show you how close it is. If someone applies to UJ for a sport administration job, I'm gonna get a call from non-side UJ. Say, hey, do you know this person? I see, man, he's from Cape Town, he applied here, do you know? Or even in case that I would get a call saying, hey, this person, man, is from your province, apply to us. Do you know? That is how close the industry is. So we speak amongst ourselves about the candidates that we employ. So it means that if you have not been good in establishing your networks, a Mandla Gagayi will say, I don't know that person. It's the first time I'm hearing about that person. Then already that is a red flag on the other side. How can he come from Cape Town and he's not known in Cape Town?
By the people in Cape Town.
That's the challenges in the sports industry.
So I'm picking up there that it's not only resting on the theory that you've accomplished at school and the certificate, but essentially getting the experience through volunteer work. Biting, I think that's one of the phrases that's quite used a lot by the motivational speakers and productivity, people that teach about productivity, eating the frog. Eating the frog and taking on volunteer work. And number two, essentially networking. And if I'm then to ask you, in the sports industry, I think there's not a lot of opportunities, especially in South Africa, for sports administrators to network besides me coming and knocking on your door. Are you aware of any networking opportunities, or how would you advise young people to start those networking?
You see, a young person in Khayelitsha with a passion for sport needs to wake up, go to UWC or CPUT or UCT or Stellenbosch sports department and say, I'm here, I would like to volunteer because I see myself in future in this industry. That is how it starts. I'm a product of volunteering. Like I told you, I never studied sport, but I found myself working as a sport administrator because of that voluntary work which I did. So, but currently, today, people don't want to volunteer. Those who come, they come looking for a job, and there are no jobs. So come, spend your time volunteering, then people will notice. And that is how you will get employed.
All right.
Or even if you don't come to UWC, go to your school next door. Go to your school. We know there are no, our schools, especially in the townships, we don't have sport directors like in your previous models schools. Go there and say, I have this sporting background. I would like to work with your kids after school. Run an after-school program. That is how you're gonna get spotted. But currently, people don't want to do that because they expect to get a salary for what they do.
No, I want to actually pick your brain then. If I am to put you in a challenge-free world, let's put it like that, and we then give you a magical wand to say, you decide, what does the future of South African sports look like? What would you say the ideal South African sporting landscape would look like, or what would you like it to look like?
So I would like to look at like a New Zealand sport or Australian sport, where sport there is a business and there are proper structures from under 9 up to senior. You can track an athlete. But here in South Africa, the problem you get spotted at 25 years and then we say he's a youngster with a bright future at 25. So I would like a system where there are enough sporting facilities for children to experience sport at a very young age, with a tracking system that will allow us then to track that talent until it reaches its peak. There will be funding for sport, because currently we have serious talent in South Africa. Talent is not a problem, but the problem is funding, and because of that challenge of funding, it becomes now a rich kid must play because we pay to play. So with funding, we can eliminate all those barriers into sport, and there must definitely be bias towards women. If we're speaking about redress, women were the biggest victims of apartheid. Yes, men wear, but not like women. So there must be that biasness towards women, which is what we have implemented at UWC. So that is what I would like the future to be like.
And if we are then to compare what you see the future being like to what we currently have, what maybe you can give us two of these. What are the strategies that you would say we could probably walk out of this office and start talking about or implementing to move us into that direction of building sport as a business?
The first one is reintroduction of physical education in schools. Again, currently we pay a nice lip service about it. At every conference, the ministers speak about it, but it does not happen. We need to have a compulsory physical education at school and a compulsory after-school program. Because when we grew up, we knew that every Wednesday we are going to play against another school, or every Thursday or Friday we're going to have an inter-class sport. Those things need to be brought back and be compulsory, because that is where the ethos of sport and the principles of sport get inculcated. And that can only happen successfully if then we say each school must have adequate facilities. Because currently we have schools who don't even have a soccer pitch. So we must plow facilities into schools, make physical education compulsory and sports participation compulsory. The difference between black school, township schools, and these former modern schools, that sport is compulsory for modern schools. My son studies here at the Settlers High. They know that it's compulsory. You must have a summer sport and a winter sport. It's compulsory. But you go to the township, you don't even find a sports teacher. And you cannot expect now my English teacher to also be a soccer coach. He doesn't even know soccer. So that is what needs to change.